Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing great. It was so fun seeing a lot of you at the High Note Challenge the last 3 days, and can't get rid of me yet because we are back for our Myofunctional Therapy for Singers Part 2. Last time, our wonderful panelist unfortunately had internet problems, so couldn't join us, but it actually worked out better because we have so much information. We almost had to break it into 2 parts. So right now, I'm going to bring on a wonderful tenor, Bryce Lupoli, and he's going to tell us his story about and his experiences with myofunctional therapy and how it helped him as a singer and what it could possibly do for you, which is the most important part. So without further ado, here is Bryce, and I'm going to bring him onto the screen. Hi, Bryce. How are you?
Hi, Julia. I'm doing really well. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and whoever's listening, watching today.
Yay, wonderful. So, Bryce, tell us a little bit about your background and sort of your journey in terms of myofunctional therapy and what got you interested in it.
Yes. So I started singing in high school because I'm an awful freehand artist, and there was an art requirement in high school. And one of my best friends growing up is Jana McIntyre, who made it to the finals of the Met competition last year. And she'd been singing for a while already, and she said, "You should join choir. It's an easy A, and you get to go on a free trip to San Francisco." And I was like, "I'm in." So I fell in love with singing when I was in high school, and I was above average, but not great, and I didn't take it so seriously. But I performed in musicals and Broadway reviews through high school, and then I went to Hamilton College, a small liberal arts college in upstate New York. And the one thing I knew I wasn't going to major in was music, because I was interested in so many things, and I wanted to make money and have a solid, consistent, stable career. But the heart wants what the heart wants, and I took a semester off, and on that semester off, I met Vladimir Chernov, who is a voice teacher at UCLA, is a phenomenal baritone, in my opinion, one of the best baritones of the last 50 years. And when I heard him sing, I felt like I was in the presence of vocal greatness for the first time in my life, and also that he knew how to transmit it to me, because these are distinct skills. And
absolutely,
I got hooked. I ended up going back to Hamilton for practical reasons to complete my degree, and majored in music, but still didn't study voice a lot or seriously there, didn't make a lot of improvement there. But as soon as I graduated, I started an apprenticeship. This was 4 years ago, with Olga, his wife, Olga Sergeyevna Toporkova, who's like his technique teacher. She traveled all around the world with him and would tune up his voice before he'd go out and perform. And he's a wonderful technique teacher as well, but principally the artist. And totally rebuilt my voice with them, had really poor breathy resonance before working with them, not an operatic sound at all.
mm-hmm.
And I made a lot of progress over about 2 years, and then it was in the summer after the second year, when I was singing in this program with others and working hard and feeling like their style is from Manuel Garcia, and big emphasis on vowels. And I felt like my vowels were becoming smooth, flexibility was getting better, consistency of voice throughout range. But then when I would go to sing consonants or sing a song, it was like I was doing something completely different. And I watched what other singers were doing, and it just seemed so much easier for them. And I had dealt with vocal fatigue problems much more than my fellow high school choir singers. And I still was lacking in a full operatic range.
Mhm.
And I always had really bad low notes, even though I felt like I naturally had a voice that sat lower than most tenors. Like a D was the lowest concert note that I was comfortable with.
Mhm.
Um, I couldn't vocal fry,
Okay.
and my falsetto was very, very spotty. It felt very strained.
Mhm.
And one day I was watching Vladimir. I don't remember what song he was singing, but he was trying to help me employ this principle of separation. And all of us who sing have some concept of this. Like a pianist, we want to be able to move our fingers separately so that when we just are trying to hit a note with our fifth finger, we're not also slamming down the others. So teach this principle of separation to my tongue so that I could Ave Maria de la la, and not la 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 na
Yeah.
na, la 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 na 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 da da da. And I was watching his tongue, and he was keeping his jaw about that open. I
Mhm.
was watching his tongue, and it's like his tongue was just floating up there, and his jaw was hanging totally loose, and the floor of his tongue was low. So if you look in the mirror,
Uh-huh.
there's that portion,
Uh-huh.
and then the part below. And the floor of his tongue was staying below his lower teeth, and it was just the upper part of the tongue that was moving. And one of the most amazing aspects of his voice is if you listen to his largo, I think it's the best diction of any largo
Mhm.
of the last 60 years. It's just, go ahead.
May I ask you a question
Yeah.
right here? Because how can you tell that somebody's floor, like how could you see that the floor, I guess, are you referring to that part underneath, that
Yeah.
that was low? How could you tell or hear that that was low?
The lighting, like when I look in my own video, I can see it in my mouth. La 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 la. Instead of
Oh, I see. When you are articulating the consonants, not when you're holding a vowel.
no, no.
Okay,
When you're
that's where I
articulating
was.
the consonants.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay, now I understand. Sorry.
And I could just hear how his line was totally uninterrupted by the consonants. And when I went to do that, it didn't just feel like I couldn't do it. It felt like it was not structurally possible for me.
Hmm.
Like I was using a totally different mechanism of
Yeah.
articulation than he was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was after this experience that I went online and started trying to figure out if something was going on that nobody had told me about. Because I come from a background of sports, played sports all through high school and college, and I'm a biomechanics, sports science junkie, and think all of those principles need to be applied in fullness to singing. And I was like, we have isolation training for various components of athletics. There must be something like that for the tongue. And that's when I came across both myofunctional therapy
Mm-hmm.
and information on tongue ties.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read about tongue ties, I felt this puzzle piece fall into place where the whole image started to make sense of various components of my life that had seemed to be unconnected to one another, but which in fact were all arising from a single cause, such as I was a mouth breather
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, so nose breather, lips
Mm-hmm.
are gently touching, walking down the street, breathing through your nose, mouth breather,
Mm-hmm.
breathing like that. I got sore throats all the time. Whenever I would get sick, it would go to my throat. I learned that I teach breathing now, and so have gone into this much more fully, trying to heal myself and also share what I've learned with others, that the nose moisturizes the air so that it's properly conditioned by the time it hits your throat. It also purifies the air. It also contains nitric oxide, which dilates the throat and dilates the blood vessels. And so that suddenly made sense. Oh, I'm not filtering any of the particulates the way that they're supposed to be. So of course I'm contracting infections at a higher rate than others. Then I was a tongue thruster. So tongue thrusting is something that often occurs in conjunction with a tongue tie, where, especially when swallowing, but at rest also, the tongue pushes forward. So in a proper swallow, as Amanda may have shared, the whole tongue is resting on the palate. Maybe the edges of the tongue are slightly touching the teeth, but there isn't much pressure. We froze for.
Oh.
Can you see me, Julia?
Yeah, I can see you. Yeah, you're here.
We're back. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be much pressure at all. For example, you should be able to stick out your tongue and see on the sides of the tongue that there isn't any scalloping, which is indentations on your tongue from being pressed against the teeth. I have slight scalloping because my tongue is bigger than my jaw is.
Okay.
So I don't know what Amanda talked about, but the position of the tongue, this is still hypothesis, but it's hypothesis that is gaining traction in the medical community. The position of the tongue enlarges and shapes the jaw. So when the tongue is resting on the palate, when you swallow, it should push up and forward into the palate. And it actually, over time, as your tongue grows your upper jaw. And your lower jaw grows via signals that are sent from the upper jaw to the lower jaw.
Wait, can you say this again about the swallowing thing? Because I'm sitting here going, I don't do that.
So when our tongue is at rest, it should be resting on the upper palate.
Yeah, I got that. I got that down.
When you swallow, it should not leave that position. And when you swallow, if you do it slow motion, I as a man, have the blessing of this large Adam's apple. When I swallow, the larynx rises. The larynx and the tongue are attached. That rise pushes the tongue up and forward.
Oh.
And it's still a hypothesis. It hasn't been scientifically proven, but it's gaining traction. And I'm an advocate of this hypothesis. We'll see. I'll happily retract it if I'm wrong on this. But that cheekbones are made higher and more pronounced, more forward by that pressure. Jawline is created also forward and square head growth instead of long face and flat head growth.
Interesting. So, like, in other words, we can learn how to sing better and look better. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so. There, you can go. I don't know if Amanda talked about him. I know you did when we spoke, Julia. Go look at Michael Mew, Dr. Michael Mew's website, and he has photographic evidence of how the face shapes of his patients have changed over time through this work, and it's by the mechanism that I just mentioned.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So in tongue thrusting, because the lingual frenum, the lingual frenum is restricting the ability for the tongue to move upwards. The tongue doesn't comfortably rest on the palate. So it rests low, and it also, in many people, as it did with me, pushes forward in order to clear the airway. So that, because the body prioritizes being able to breathe over having a good tongue posture.
Makes sense, right?
Makes sense. So when I would swallow, my tongue would be pushed up and forward, but that pressure wouldn't go into my palate. It would go into my teeth. So I had splayed teeth in mainly the upper, but the lower too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Big gaps in my teeth. I had braces after this.
Yeah.
So that's why
Jennifer, it's Michael Mew, M-E-W. Sorry, I'm just answering a question on here. Yeah, Michael Mew. So, and he's a dentist, right? I think he is.
I believe he's an orthodontist.
Orthodontist, yes.
And
correct.
The specific practice within orthodontics that his father pioneered, also named Michael Mew, is called orthotropics. So
right.
It is the branch of orthodontics that advocates for a restructuring of the orientation of the teeth by getting the tongue functioning properly.
Yeah, yeah.
So after I got my braces, I was told by my orthodontist, once the braces came off and my smile looked nice again, thankfully, that I would need to wear a retainer every night for the rest of my life. And this was one of those moments where a light bulb went off in my mind, and that came into place when that puzzle piece of, oh, you have a tongue tie hit. Was, even though I was like 15, I went, what are you talking about? Like, why would that be necessary? What sort of dysfunctional animal am I to push my teeth that are necessary for my survival into a place where they are at mechanical disadvantage and prone to breaking? Like, this can't be as simple as you're saying. Something must be going wrong deeply.
Yeah.
But I asked some question, I don't remember what it was, and he said, it's just how it works. I'm like, okay, I'm 15, you're a doctor. I guess you know better than I do. He didn't. So I also, there were specific consonants in my singing that caused me much more difficulty than others. And they were the lingual consonants. I had a brutal time rolling my R's. Couldn't do that before, even though I'd try. I couldn't do a uvular R, French R, at all. Before. My K consonants, C and K, were more like
back.
Yeah, so you can't really.
Rather than. Yeah.
So the back of my tongue touching a rather flaccid, soft palate. Inactive soft palate.
Yeah.
Instead of being more active in the back of the tongue going all the way up to the hard palate.
Yeah.
And so I would sing a line, Ave Mar, and then it would feel like I get to that. And the metaphor that came to me is like I'm driving on the road, and then I'd be pulled off the road, and then I'd be bumpy, try to get back on the road, feeling flow in the vowels, and then losing it.
Yeah.
And I learned that this was because of that tongue restriction. When I would go to bring my tongue up to my palate to do the rolled R, my whole larynx would rise too,
Oh.
and the
Mine
root of
does
the
too.
tongue would contract, and it would decrease my cricothyroid space and impair the clean, consistent vibration of my chords. So the
So
whole feeling consistency of my voice would go off the road.
So if any of you are watching and you have slight tendencies towards like hypochondria or you're a Virgo, you're going to listen to this and you're going to be like, oh my God, like I'm sitting here, I'm both, right? Hypochondriac and Virgo. I'm sitting here and I'm going, oh my God. Oh, Mike definitely raised it. You know, it's funny because Amanda was on here. You weren't on here when we were all three talking. And Amanda's like, yeah, you definitely have a slight tongue tie. And I'm like, oh, good to know. Good to know. Let's get this looked at. So I got my appointment with her next week.
That's a really, really important point that you bring up, Julia, because there's a tendency in all of us to try to find quick answers to the problems that we're dealing with. And perhaps some people who, well, I suspect just about everyone can have better tongue function, but far from everyone is going to have a tongue tie who's listening to this. Most people do not. But you probably do still have a level of tongue tension in your singing and speaking that can be improved.
Yeah.
So when I came across all of this information, I first spoke with Olga and said, Olga, I think I have a tongue tie and it's keeping me from fulfilling my singing potential. And she said, oh, yes, I know.
Like, you didn't want to tell me this before?
And I was like, yeah, why didn't you tell me? And she said something similar to what the wisdom you were advocating, Julia, which is, I didn't want you to think that all of your singing troubles are because of that. And I didn't want to give you a limiting belief that because there was something structural that wasn't optimal, you therefore wouldn't be able to sing well, because that's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, that makes sense. And I understand how that's a hard line to navigate.
Yeah.
So her practice has basically been laissez-faire. If someone feels that this is a problem, then they'll find the answer themselves.
Yeah.
At some point, we could get into discussion about the responsibility of a teacher to enter into that engagement, but we won't go there now. I found a myofunctional therapist when I got back to Santa Barbara, where I grew up and where I was living at the time. And her name is Barbara Green. She was great. And she was a pioneer in the field also. She's been doing this work for a long time. Hi, Barbara, if you ever see this. She taught me about where the tongue should be placed and took me through exercises that helped habituate it, because the muscle memory for what our tongue is doing is so deeply ingrained. It's equivalent to your muscle memory for walking. You have walked basically your whole life, and if a physical therapist says to you, you want to press down through your big toes when you walk, you might work on that for an hour every day, but if you're not thinking about it for weeks, probably months, whenever you're standing and walking, the momentum of that habit that you've built up is going to linger.
Yes.
It takes a lot of work to rehabituate that level of habitual muscle programming.
Yeah.
So I started working with her. I would do, I think, about 20 minutes of myofunctional therapy exercises each day, but the real work was at rest, lips closed, tip of the tongue at the spot, which is just behind the teeth up on the palate. And when I first started, the back of my tongue really didn't want to go up at all. I'd basically just be the tip of my tongue there. And the quality of my speaking, the quality of my singing improved doing this. My rolled R's became much more comfortable. My k started to actually be a proper k. But it got to, after working with her, and the quality of my sleep improved. When your tongue is in the right position in your mouth, it opens up your airways. It also promotes an activation of these healthy singing muscles and breathing muscles, and signals to your body to be in a more parasympathetic state of nervous system excitement. So I was sleeping much more deeply. If you're mouth breathing when you sleep, the sleep isn't nearly as deep as if you're nose breathing. Recommend you look into it if you think that maybe you're mouth breathing when you sleep.
Oh, I definitely am a mouth breather when I sleep. Definitely.
That it's worth exploring, Julia.
I think a lot of people are. Yeah, it's like, okay, you might not have a tongue tie per se, but I think everyone can benefit from some aspect of myofunctional therapy, for sure.
Definitely. I see a lot of parallels between the function of the tongue and the function of the glutes. So in sports science, we know that we want to be glutes dominant. So like I said, I'm a junkie for sports science biomechanics. But why I bring this up is we aren't living our old primal lifestyles that our bodies were designed to develop within. We're sitting all the time, like you and I are, and in the same way that massage reduces tension in muscles through prolonged pressure, that prolonged pressure on our glutes all the time is signaling to our body that the glutes should be less active. Whereas the glutes are supposed to be our primary motor of locomotive energy, where we're supposed to get most of the force from when we run and walk, jump, and they become amnesiatic. And it causes a whole host of improper motor patterns in the body, in the same way that the tongue, because we aren't chewing proper foods, we aren't exercising as often, the tongue becomes lazy, amnesiac in many more people than just those who have tongue ties.
Wow. This is I'm listening to this again and I'm thinking, okay, I mean, the glutes are such an important part of our posture as well. So if you're talking about the tongue, like the upper body posture, right? And then the glutes, the lower body posture. So if you're a singer, you've got some dysfunction, like this is something you want to take care of.
Absolutely. I'll do a quick name drop. If you're interested in holistic body function, getting it back to the state that it's supposed to be in, and activating amnesiatic glutes, getting posture good, period, increasing your athleticism. Chong Ye, Chong, first name. Xie, Xie.
Here, I'm going to put it in Chong.
Xie. Anyone who speaks Chinese is probably going, your Chinese is awful, but that's my best.
How do you spell it?
Xie.
Xie.
And if you search Chong Xie fascia training, he is, as far as I know, doing unparalleled work in the field, and it's my belief that in 10 years' time, his method is going to be everywhere. He's been called a quack about 2 years ago, and now he's trained world champions. So
it's how it always is. Everybody, they're calling you a lunatic until they see that you're right. That is so funny. I love. Somebody wrote. I see Facebook user, but
Mhm.
it said that they've been trying to activate their glutes more in their workouts. And this is a fascinating connection with the amnesiatic tongue. Yeah, it's crazy.
If you're trying to activate your glutes, check out Chong's work.
Very cool. I put it in the chat for anyone.
Great. Yeah, he's totally changed my life. I won't get into it, but I've had, even though I'm only 28, I had big health problems. I wasn't able to walk or stand comfortably for about a year and a half because of autoimmune problems.
Oh no.
And through meditation and his fascia training, I live a healthy, active life now. So
That's
I'm really, really
beautiful.
grateful to him. So I hit a point in my work with Barbara where I said, thank you so much. This has been life-changing. I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to learn and work with you. But I still feel like it's more restricted than it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And we've improved range of motion, but that structure is still getting in my way. And if I didn't want to be a world-class singer, I wouldn't mess with this, but I
Mm-hmm.
do want to be a world-class singer, and I think I can be.
Yeah.
So let's try going with I'd like to explore a procedure, doing either a frenuloplasty or frenulectomy. And she recommended a couple doctors, but most highly recommended Dr. Zoggy. If anyone is in the California area, or even if you're somewhat in that region,
Mm-hmm.
I'd recommend, and you have, of course, a tongue tie, I'd
Mm-hmm.
recommend that you work with Dr. Zoggy. He travels around the world teaching this stuff. He went to Stanford and has been coming up with more advanced ways of surgically treating this issue. And as a singer whose livelihood and passion
Mm-hmm.
depends on the functioning of my tongue and my voice,
Yeah.
I had trepidation, some fear
Mm-hmm.
about the prospect, and I consulted a body worker who's been a mentor to me, a Belgian, Anne Anglebert,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, it's a risk, but meet with him, meet with the doctor, and see how it feels.
Yeah.
And I met with him and immediately felt that he was a talented, smart, highly capable,
Mm-hmm.
kind man who would be honest with me.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, he said, yes, you have a tongue tie. um, grade 2, and I think you would be benefited by frenuloplasty. And he answered a lot of questions. I said, my big question, what's your rate of complication?
Oh yeah.
And he said 0 several months out.
Hmm.
There were some people who had pain for a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people who had um, somewhat persistent bleeding,
Mm-hmm.
not not terribly, but some who had numbness for a couple of weeks, but
Mm-hmm.
none that he had done the procedure on who had long-term negative
That's
effects.
great. We have one question. I just want to put it up on the
Yes.
screen for you to see. How long did you work with Barbara before doing the procedure with Dr. Z?
Hi, Sanjeev.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with Barbara for I think 3 months.
Okay.
Could be a little off on that, but that's approximately the amount of time.
Okay. And you
And
think you felt like
like
that
I
was a good
said,
amount of time?
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes months to implement that work
Yeah,
because of the habitual nature of it,
of
like we
course.
discussed before.
This is interesting. We unfortunately, whoever is Facebook user, the reason I don't see your name is because you have to sign into StreamYard. But I'm going to show your comment because it's this is really interesting. I haven't had any students with this issue, but it's good to have this information. I have a question. I'm a singer and voice teacher. I find that sometimes when teachers are well-meaning and say relax your tongue, they sometimes are encouraging this amnesia, and the tongue may end up not functioning when and how it should. Thoughts? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I agree with that. 100%.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So when you ask this, I'm reminded of glutes function too and fascial fitness function, because high-level athletes have a level of connectivity throughout their body, throughout their fascia, that when they think relax, there's still a level of resting tonus where they can be explosive, but they're not jittery and locked up anymore.
Yeah.
But if you're speaking to someone who is weak, loose, like the muscle tone is fallen.
Did you come to my training session? What happened?
I'm sure you're being hard on yourself. And you tell them to relax, they're gonna be totally unprepared for any athletic activity. So the cue needs to be geared towards the individual student. Now, my understanding is, and I know there's a lot of disagreement around vocal pedagogy, but my understanding is when the tongue is being properly used in everyday life, it's on the palate, high. The back of the tongue especially is strong, and when you open your mouth, the tongue stays relatively high, and it can be relaxed and high. For people like myself and others who have more amnesiatic tongues, their default relax is sort of retracted, swallowed. And
that's me.
And the cue of relax isn't going to be helpful, in my experience.
Yeah.
And I'm a voice teacher as well,
Yeah.
so I navigate that need for discernment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
So, yes,
I want you to continue with your journey. I think I want to know too when you had, well, you're stopped at the procedure, so let's pick up from the procedure and let's go to what happened afterwards. I'm curious.
Yes, I was very encouraged by Dr. Zaghi's rate of complication, and intuitively, I like him very much. Hi, Dr. Zaghi. In case you ever see this, you're great. Thank you. So I said, okay, let's do it. We put a date down in the books, and he didn't tell me to do this, but from my meditation, spiritual background, and sports performance background, I started visualizing how the procedure was going to go and what I was going to feel, and would hold my tongue in the position that it's in when the procedure is done, which is in suction, jaw open. And I'd bring my attention to this tissue. There was more of it, and I couldn't open my mouth as widely at the time. And I'd imagine the incisions happening and feel my tissue releasing. A sense of letting go, no resistance, relaxation. And when it came time for the procedure, they just injected my tongue with some anesthetic. It was a bit of a pinch, but not terrible pain. Tongue went numb, told me to go into that position and hold. It's really important that you feel comfortable holding that position, because nothing is artificially holding that position. So if you let go of that position, you could negatively impact the procedure.
Jeez, I'm imagining that. Whoops.
So you would want to visualize holding it and being calm. And
Don't
breathing
look if you're scared.
practices are very, very good for instilling that state of nervous system. I'd be happy to share some with you if you'd like another time, Julia.
Yes, let's do it.
And it happened just like I visualized it would happen. But some other things happened that were very positive that I didn't expect. When he cut, I felt this release in my low back. I had some lordosis prior,
Yeah.
which is hyperextension of the low back. And I felt, even though I was just seated, I felt this
Oh my God.
in my low back. And this release here too, in this like sense of opening in my throat. And the procedure, I don't remember how long, I think it was only like 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably longer than that. I don't know, 12, not long.
Yeah.
He sewed things up, and even when it was sewed, he said that I could start making sound, I could speak, I didn't need to be silent. And one of the first things I did was, and it just happened.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Without the same feeling of grip, and my tongue felt so long. It felt so free.
That's awesome. Wow.
And I could sing right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were some of the vocal effects that you noticed right away? Like, oh, I can.
Yeah, right away with that decrease in tension in my throat, my low notes got better. Like right away.
Wow.
My B flat felt like how my D used to. And I didn't feel like I was being pulled off the road to the same degree.
Yeah.
And there was more like free flow of sound, period, not only on consonant. Yeah, it just felt like smoother, less obstructed.
Yeah.
And my breathing improved significantly just after the release. I'd been given the cue before working with Alexander technique teachers, feel like you're sitting in a saddle. And, that cue is to relax the low back and allow the kidneys and the side ribs to expand. But I'd always had a hard time connecting with that musculature. And when that release happened, I could start breathing into my low back in a way that I'd never had before.
Wow.
And yes, line and singing with words became easier. Speaking became easier. My speaking voice just dropped a little bit.
Wow.
But like I said before, benefits come from the procedure if you have a tongue tie. But the biggest benefits can only be attained when you do the procedure in conjunction with myofunctional therapy.
Listen to that, folks. Listen to that.
I see this a lot. Like, imagine you're a tiger and you love running around, but you're chained to a pole.
Yeah.
If you run around a lot, even though you're chained to a pole, you can still be a pretty fit tiger, but you're going to have developed weird movement mechanics that are going to stick with you even after you're released from that pole.
Yeah.
So there needs to be conscious, sustained training of that musculature to allow the tongue to move separately
Mhm.
and larynx to remain stable.
Yeah.
So working with a myofunctional therapist is absolutely necessary,
Yeah.
post-op and pre-op, to prepare
Mhm.
the for the procedure. And you may also want to work with a speech pathologist.
Okay. How is that different? How is a speech pathologist different from myofunctional therapy?
Myofunctional therapists don't do as much work on consonants. They're
Okay.
on speech and singing. I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay.
I haven't met a myofunctional therapist who is geared towards singers. Maybe there is one.
Okay. I think there is. I feel like I just read somewhere that there's a myofunctional therapist / speech pathologist. I
If you'd
will
share
find
that
out the name.
information with me, I'd be very curious.
Yes, I will go. It's somewhere in my resources, so I'll pull it up.
The chief goal of the myofunctional therapist is to give people healthy lifestyles, get them
Mhm.
breathing, get them swallowing, drinking, sleeping in a way
Mhm.
that allows them to have a healthy, fulfilling life.
Mhm.
Speaking is a small part of it.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. So they're training like specific consonants and things like that, whereas myofunctional is how you're using the tongue in everyday life. Yeah.
And they reinforce one another.
Yeah.
I don't have enough experience with speech therapists to know this for
Mhm.
sure, but from the experience that I do have, speech therapists don't place a lot of emphasis on resting tongue posture.
Mhm.
I could be wrong. Send me a message
Mhm.
if I'm wrong about that. When I think they should, I think they will in the future,
Yeah.
because in my experience, to my understanding,
Mhm.
the resting state of the tongue informs how it functions in every
Totally.
other moment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, one other side effect that influenced my singing post op is I felt the back of my tongue start to rest way more easily up on my
Mhm.
palate. And for reasons that I don't really understand, Amanda could speak to this. The tongue being placed against the soft palate strengthens the soft palate.
Yeah. She did explain that a little bit. Yeah.
And having a stronger soft palate in your singing is really, really important.
Yeah. I would say that's awesome. So now, if people are watching, like I'm sitting here, I'm watching, I'm listening, and I'm having
Thank
my
you.
session with Amanda. We know we've got people watching. There's a lot of people watching, but if I'm gonna have my session with Amanda next week, and this is probably a lot of people that are going to be watching this. Maybe you find out you do have a slight tongue tie, and then you're at that kind of decision point, like, do I want to do something about it, or do I just want to, kind of retrain the function and maybe not do the surgery? Like, what are some of the pros and cons of both of those situations?
I advocate when it comes to tongue ties and also sports injuries that people pursue the most conservative option to
Mm-hmm.
the fullness of their abilities before they go to the uh, surgical option. Because if you can get your tongue functioning at a
Mm-hmm.
totally satisfactory level without taking any risk of something maybe going wrong,
Mm-hmm.
do that.
What could go wrong? I mean, like,
So, as I said, Dr. Zaghi is great. And at the time of my procedure, that he hadn't had any complications. But I've heard from other non singers who have had this procedure that they had nerve pain.
oh,
They had numbness.
Forever?
They had until that point.
Ooh.
Yeah, discomfort goes along with nerve pain.
Yeah.
Those are the things.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
That's kind of scary. Yeah. Okay, we have another question. This is interesting. Hold on. Does tongue tie also lead to some tightness in hyoid muscles, or are these unrelated? I would imagine they're related.
They can be, yes.
Yeah.
All of the musculature here is so interwoven that
Totally.
tension in any place creates tension elsewhere.
Yeah. 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 This is really fascinating. So, can you maybe what would be your sort of 3-step advice, or what would be the steps you would go through if you suspect you might have this problem as a singer?
I would look for diagnostic instructions online, and there are images of grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 tongue tie, and look in the mirror and do the suction test and see what it's like. And throughout this step, be very aware of our propensity towards hypochondriaism. I don't know. And towards looking for a silver bullet to our answers.
Mm-hmm.
So have some spaciousness, objectivity in how you look, and try to calmly assess as though you were your own doctor and hadn't seen it before. And if it looks like there is a restriction, then contact a myofunctional therapist or a orthotropics practicing orthodontist. I think contacting a myofunctional therapist first is a better idea. And see what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best way of proceeding. I hadn't considered this question before. I'm not a doctor.
No, but I think that's pretty logical. You start. That seems like the logical place to go. Yeah.
And
Jumping to don't go to your dentist right away.
Don't
after listening to this and go
to
get
your dentist.
snipped.
Don't go to your dentist and expect helpful information on this period. Dentists are not taught about this.
Yeah.
Read through the list of other ways that your lifestyle is impacted by a tongue tie being present, and see how many of those boxes you check off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then after you've done all that reading, do some breathing or meditation and understand that your entire well-being is not bound up in whether you have a tongue tie, and that you can be happy and peaceful right now, even if you do have a tongue tie.
That is so important to remember for any of you Virgos out there like me. One question I did have, I've answered this since for myself, but I wanted to just put it out there for anyone that has this question. What kind of doctor what kinds of doctors would do a tongue tie surgery?
Correct me if you have better information than I do, but what I've heard from people in the field is ENTs who have specifically been trained in frenuloplasty, frenulectomy. There are some ENTs who are either lacking in scruples or intelligence who
Mhm.
think that because they know how to do one type of procedure, snipping that tissue down there should be pretty simple and they can do it.
Mhm.
It's more complicated than that. You really need to see an ENT who has specifically been trained in this by someone who
Mhm.
knows what they're doing. What did you hear, Julia?
So you've only heard ENT?
That's all I've heard.
That's interesting. Okay, because I read dentists that are specialized in oral surgery do this. I have heard ENT, but that's less common. More of my research has been dentist. Again, I'm not an expert. It's just my
You could be
research.
right. Yes, I
And the third was actually a plastic surgeon.
I haven't heard that at all. I have heard of dentists.
Yeah.
I do work that is adjacent to this work, teaching people how to breathe properly and sing. But I'm not a doctor. I'm not a myofunctional therapist. Don't take what I've said on that subject as authoritative word.
Okay. Yeah, I think that it's kind of probably, it's not so much the designation of of what type of doctor, it's who is the actual person doing the procedure. If they are capable of doing the procedure, you want to look at their rates of success, right? Like you were saying, you want to kind of feel that they understand where you're coming from and how important this is. So there's a lot of things, I guess it's not so much the designation of ENT or dentist or whatever. It's more about the person.
If you are considering the answer to this question seriously, what you should do, I think, is not really listen to Julia or me. And when you talk to your myofunctional therapist and believe they're highly capable and trustworthy, ask them.
Well, listen to this. Okay, Sanju said, please don't go to a dentist. They rarely do this procedure. I went to a regular dentist. He messed up. It is important to go to the specialist. Dr. Zagi is specialist. He is doing corrective surgery. Ooh, he messed up. How was it messed up? I'm curious. Interesting.
Yeah, so I've also heard that dentists do this and they tend to not be trained in the way that they're supposed to. I don't know that across the board. I'm sure there are dentists who do a very good job of this, but the examples I have heard of it not going as well as one would hope have been with dentists.
Ooh, okay. That is good to know then. Very
Talk
good
to
to
your
know.
myofunctional therapist.
Oh no. He has worse tongue tie than before because the regular dentist messed up. Oh no. Ooh, that's not good.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Sanjeev.
I'm very sorry. I hope you're seeking some help from somebody.
Yes, I hope you're working with a team now that can support you in the way that you need.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, that was like such amazing information. I mean, I think my mind is a little overwhelmed. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are like, whoa, this is crazy. Because we all felt that way after Amanda's presentation. And now hearing this from the singer perspective, like, wow, so many things to consider. I like what you said about considering all the holes, like being conservative and realizing that it is possible to sing well with a mild tongue tie. It is. And not have a problem and maybe not have to do anything about it.
I know a great baritone who has a fairly significant tongue tie, and he says that it doesn't cause him any trouble.
See? There you go. That's a silver lining for anyone who's out there, like me, being a Virgo and stressing out. It's good to know. It's very good to know.
If anyone has any questions, my Instagram is Bryce-Lupoli.
And Bryce, you also do a lot of work. Can you talk about the work that you do?
Yes, so I teach breathing. I also teach moving meditation and regular sitting meditation. I won't go way down the rabbit hole, but I was very depressed for 8 years, suicidally depressed for 2, and serious health complications got stacked on top of that depression. Couldn't comfortably walk or stand because of systemic pseudoarthritis for a little over a year and a half, and took me to a monastery and was there for 5 weeks. And my understanding of my life, what it means to be a human being, where joy comes from, where peace and meaning come from, how to be in relationship with the world and others, what it means for there to be an other, all shifted for the better. It's a totally different life that I'm in now than the one I was in before. And I share this. I share some of the tools that I feel very blessed to have received, that are my peace and joy and refuge, especially in times of hardship, suffering. So I share some of those things on Instagram. I lead donation-based classes through Zoom 4 days
What's
a
your
week.
handle? What's your handle? I'm going to put it. Bryce Lupoli. There we go.
I'd love to share the practice with you. I think the word teacher is a little funny in this context, because all I aim to do is share the same tools, knowledge that I'm so fortunate to have received and that have helped transform me from someone who believed they were fundamentally, psychologically, biochemically sad, melancholic, to someone who's happy.
Amazing.
Who in the midst of serious things going wrong in life can still feel the light and warmth coming out of their heart and fall asleep soundly at night.
That's beautiful. Well, Bryce, thank you so much. And maybe if you wouldn't mind just putting your info, your website in the chat, so that people can contact you in the group, because I think the group, we can't post to the group via StreamYard, but maybe then people can get in touch with you.
And
amazing.
One last thing.
Yes.
Breathing. So breathing is talked about a lot in yoga. I started getting into yoga when I was 16, and I didn't understand why breathing was talked about so much, because I didn't have an experience. None of my yoga teachers gave me an experience that proved to me why it's important. I just thought it was about improving the quality of your stretch. But the breath is a very controllable gateway into well-being. It's hard, it takes practice to control your mind when your mind is racing, freaking out. It can be learned. You can learn it. But controlling the body is a much more manageable introduction to quieting the mind, quieting the racing sensations in our body. So I'd highly recommend that you, can we actually do a 45-second breath practice right now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'd like you to just take it, I'll say it out first and then we'll do it together. We're going to take a deep inhalation through the nose. We're going to hold for 10 seconds, and then after the 10 seconds, we're going to sigh out. And as we sigh out, we're going to feel with the voice is leaving all stress, and we feel like we're sinking down into our favorite chair at the end of a long day. We're going to do this 4 times.
Okay.
So with me, fully in through the nose. Hold. Relax. Voiced ah out. Fully in. Hold. Sink down. 2 more. Fully in. Hold. Last one. Fully in. Hold.
Wow.
How do you feel,
I
Julia?
love that spinning feeling when we're holding the breath at the top, and you can just feel like the chi flowing in all parts of the body. It's amazing.
Amen.
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic.
If anyone would like to explore a breath practice, either together, one-on-one, or you'd like me to just point you towards some resources, reach out to me. I'd be very, very happy to share.
Thank you. That is so kind and generous of you. And you really are, I don't know you very well, but I hope to get to know you better. You really are a just generous, glowing spirit. And I'm so happy to have you here and to know you through this.
Thank you, Julia. It's been such a pleasure getting to spend some time with you, and I'd love to breathe together sometime and just chat.
Yes. Let's do it. I'm going to end the broadcast and then we can say our goodbyes. So we'll say goodbye to the public now. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. So
Thank
good
you
to be
for
here with you.
watching.
Have a great day.